Hey guys, this is Kerry from CSS. We get a lot of questions about how to finish our speakers once people put them together, and I'm going to show you today two ways to apply veneer. In my opinion, veneer is the easiest way to get a really good finish on any of our speaker cabinets, and it's a lot easier than most people think. So we're going to start by going through how you would apply raw veneer with what's called the cold press method, and then we're going to talk about the iron-on method, which works only with paperback veneer. But I'll show you in detail how to do both of these, and I think once you see how it's done, it's a lot easier than you are anticipating. Okay, the first method I'm going to start with is called the cold press method. This is very similar to what professional furniture makers use to veneer furniture that they're making in an industrial setting. The supplies that you're going to need are going to be your veneer, which again, you can use paperback or raw when you're doing cold press, but when you're doing iron-on, you can only use paperback. That's a very important point that you need to make sure. If you apply iron to the raw veneer, it will tend to split and crack. So you're going to need the piece that you're veneering, which we're going to use a scrap panel here just for demonstrations, and you're going to need a clamping platter, which is essentially going to sit over the top of this piece. You're going to just clamp it down with some clamps to get it nice and tight. The veneer is going to go in between these. One other important thing to note is that you're going to need something. I recommend wax paper. It's really easy. But we're going to use some plastic that we have here. This is going to go, we're going to do veneer over the top of the piece that we're doing. Then we're going to do a liner that won't stick to the glue. And then we'll do a clamping platter over the top. I have had once before where I forgot that, and your clamping platter will glue to the veneer and you'll ruin your whole workpiece. So please don't make the same mistake I did. You're also going to need a glue roller and some type of wood glue. There are a lot of wood glues that you can use. You can use just regular Titebond that you can buy even at Walmart, or what we like is this Express veneer adhesive from veneersupplies.com. So this is a little thicker, and they have different shades so that it's tinted to match closer to the wood. So if there is any squeeze out, it's a little less noticeable. Okay, so we're going to start. I'm going to use the Titebond, which is probably most likely what someone else is going to use. We'll start with the piece here, and all we're going to do is drizzle some Titebond on so we get a decent coating. And then we're going to start rolling it out with the roller. And the roller, you can buy a specific glue roller, which is typically like a higher density foam or a rubber. I got this also from veneersupplies.com, but you can use a foam paintbrush. You just typically have to load it up a little bit more with glue. So we're going to roll that out and get a nice even coating. And you want to pay particular attention to the edges to make sure you have enough glue so that the edges of the panel adhere to the veneer. So we're just going to do the panel side, not the veneer side. Get the whole thing nice and coated. The glue, as it dries, will suck away from the edges, so that's why it's important to make sure that you've got it pushed all the way up, touching every single edge before you start applying the veneer. Okay, so this is what your panel should look like before you apply the veneer. Now we're going to take our sheet of veneer, which again was already pre-trimmed. We're going to line it up so that we've got the whole piece covered. Have a little bit of overhang on all the sides. Now I'm going to take the plastic in between. We'll take our clamping platter, and now we're going to take a couple of clamps. These are oversized for what you need. Depending on how big the cabinet is, you're going to need to go from one side to the other. So on something like our 1TDX kit, you'll need something that can clamp up to about 16 inches. But for this, we're just going to hang it over the table a little bit, get the clamps in there. I'm going to put 4 clamps on this, and that's about all you would need for any of our speaker projects. If you're clamping up, if you're going to do veneer on something like our 2TDX tower, you're going to need more clamps than this, but on any of our smaller bookshelf kits, you should be able to get by with 4 clamps. And then we'll let that sit like this for about 2 hours. Okay, now we're going to talk about the iron-on method. The iron-on method is a little bit different because you're going to apply veneer to both sides, so both the substrate and the veneer. And again, it's very important that you only do this method with paper-backed veneer. If you do it with raw veneer, it can split the veneer, or when you apply the glue to the veneer, to the backside of the veneer, it will also make it really wavy and it won't want to flatten out once you try to apply the iron. So for this you need veneer. Again, the piece that you're going to veneer, this is another scrap panel that we have. You're going to want some blue tape to hold the veneer down because it will, you can see it's already curled up, and as we apply the glue and it starts to dry, it wants to curl even more. And then you'll need some type of glue. So this can be done with Titebond. I'm not a huge fan of using the Titebond, but I know a lot of other people have had a lot of success with that. I like this heat lock glue from veneersupplies.com again. This is only a little bit more expensive than using Titebond. And again, you can get it tinted so that if you're using a darker wood like walnut, it doesn't show as much. It's also a little bit more flexible once it dries and hardens than the Titebond, so that as the veneer moves, as all real wood does, it is less likely to split and crack. So the first thing we're going to do is take our veneer and we're going to tape it down so that we can apply the glue. So I just use blue painter's tape for this. You want to tape it out close to the edges so that you have lots of area to put the glue on. And once you've got it taped down pretty well, we'll take the glue in the roller and roll the glue out. So again, I'm going to use the heat lock here. We're going to do it in the same way we did the raw veneer. We're just going to apply some and then roll this out. So once this is applied, this needs to dry for about 2 hours before you come back and you do the iron-on method. So you're going to do a nice layer on both the veneer and then on the substrate. So a couple of key things to watch out for when you're doing the iron-on method as opposed to the cold press. So when you apply the glue, you let that glue dry directly to the air as opposed to between the substrates. So it's even more important to get the edges coated well because as the glue dries, it will start to shrink and pull in. So sometimes I go back with a light second coat just on the edges as it starts to dry, just to make sure I have plenty of glue there to make sure that the veneer doesn't lift on any of the corners. The other thing is this glue, if you use the heat lock, it will, if the glue looks wet at all and you start to apply it, it will act like contact cement and it will stick like crazy. Don't ask me how I know, but it definitely will. So you want to make sure it's completely dry. It does have a dry time on it, or a usable window on it, so you're supposed to let it dry for at least 2 hours and not more than 24. If you do happen to go 24, it still will stick. It just doesn't melt as well as it does in that first 24-hour window period. So what I've done in the past is I will come back and do a incredibly light second coat where the glue is still just a little bit wet and you can see through directly to the substrate, and then I will apply the pieces so it still lets you line everything up and then apply the iron. And that has worked really well for me in the past, but that's only if you let the glue dry too long. All right, the glue on our veneer and on our substrate is dry now, so it's been about 4 hours and we're gonna apply these. So I've got an iron here that's been warming up. You just use a regular household iron. You wanna use it on the cotton or linen setting. It needs some pretty high heat. The biggest thing is to just keep the iron moving a little bit so that you don't burn the wood. So I'm just gonna lay this on, and you can see the benefit of using iron-on as opposed to contact cement is I can still slide this around and it's not sticking. So now I've got my piece on here, and I'm just going to start applying the iron, and I'm just going to go in strokes like this, pushing towards the corners. Now, as you heat this up, the veneer can slide around a little bit over the substrate. So if you cut your veneer very tight, you may see that it will start to pull away from the edges. So we're just gonna make sure we apply heat everywhere. And as we go over the edges, we want to roll the iron a little bit to kind of push down that corner. The corners are the most sensitive spot here that can come up easily, so we want to make sure that we really get in there and push down on those corners. Now, some people will use a t-shirt or a towel between. I have found that that is a little bit harder to do for me personally. As long as you just keep the iron moving, you will do an okay job and it won't burn the wood. If you have a very high oil content wood like rosewood, you might notice a little bit of scorching, and it might be better to test a sample first and then try it with the t-shirt to prevent that. But with something like walnut, I've never really had an issue. So you're just pressing firmly and continuing to iron over the surface. Now, one of the nice things about the iron-on method as well is you can go over and you can kind of tap with your fingers, and you'll hear a difference if the veneer is not stuck all the way. So I'm going to apply a little more heat right here. And that's it. So now this piece is fully veneered, and you can trim it pretty easily with either a router with a down cut spiral bit, or you can even just use a knife like this with a sharp razor blade. You're just gonna get right in there and make some shallow passes.